Thomas Whitley had always considered himself a reasonable man. His little house at the end of Maple Street wasn't much to look at, but it was his, paid for with 15 years of hard work at the local power plant. The irony wasn't lost on him. Spending his days managing electricity for an entire county while coming home to his modest two-bedroom with a perfect little covered porch where he'd sit every evening, nursing a cold beer and watching the neighborhood go by. That peace, however, was about to be interrupted by something far more aggravating than any power outage he'd ever managed. Karen Dennison had moved into the neighborhood about 6 months ago, bringing with her a gleaming white Tesla and an attitude that suggested the world existed primarily for her convenience. She'd already made herself known to most of the residents on Maple Street, complaining about their lawn ornaments, the color of their mailboxes, and even the times they chose to walk their dogs. Although the neighborhood had no official HOA, Karen seemed determined to appoint herself as one. Thomas had managed to avoid any direct confrontation with her so far. His house sat at the end of the street, separated from the others by a small patch of shared green space, which gave him a buffer from most neighborhood drama. But that buffer was about to disappear faster than ice cream on a summer sidewalk. The first time he caught Karen using his electricity, Thomas was more confused than angry. He'd come home from a late shift to find an extension cord snaking from his outdoor outlet, the one he'd installed himself to power his holiday decorations, across the small patch of grass between his property and the street parking. At the end of that cord was Karen's pristine Tesla, drinking up his electricity like a thirsty marathon runner. Thomas stood there for a solid minute, trying to process what he was seeing. Was this some kind of joke? Had she asked, and he'd forgotten? No, that was impossible. He'd never even spoken more than a passing good morning to the woman. He followed the cord back to his house, unplugged it from his outlet, and coiled it up neatly. Then, still holding the cord, he walked over to the Tesla. The charging light was off now, of course. He placed the coiled extension cord on the hood of the car and went inside, figuring that would be the end of it. He was wrong. The very next evening, Thomas came home to find the exact same setup. This time, though, there was a note tucked into the plug at his outlet. "Thanks for letting me borrow some electricity. These public charging stations are highway robbery. Neighborly sharing is what makes a community great. Karen." Thomas felt his eyebrow twitch. Neighborly sharing? She hadn't asked. She had just helped herself, and judging by the timer on his smart outlet app, she'd been charging her car for 6 hours. That wasn't some electricity. That was a significant chunk of his monthly utility bill. This time, Thomas decided to address the issue directly. He unplugged the cord again, walked over to Karen's house, and meticulously kept 2-story with potted plants so perfectly arranged they looked artificial, and rang the doorbell. Karen answered wearing a beige cardigan and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, hello. You must be Thomas from down the street. I've been meaning to introduce myself properly." Thomas held up the extension cord. "Is this yours?" Karen's smile didn't falter. "Yes. Thank you for returning it. I hope you don't mind me borrowing a bit of power. These electric cars are wonderful for the environment, but charging them can be such a hassle." "Actually," Thomas said, keeping his voice even, "I do mind. You didn't ask permission, and electricity isn't free." Karen's expression shifted, just slightly, a momentary crack in her pleasant facade. "Well, I left you a note. I thought that was sufficient. It's only a few dollars of electricity, and we neighbors should help each other out, don't you think?" Thomas handed her the cord. "If you'd like to use my electricity, we can work out a payment arrangement. Otherwise, please use the public charging stations." Karen's smile disappeared completely now. "I didn't realize you were going to be so difficult about this." "Fine. I was just trying to be environmentally conscious. The charging stations are all the way across town." Thomas turned to leave. "Have a good evening, Karen." As he walked back to his house, he could feel her glare burning into his back. He knew this wouldn't be the end of it. People like Karen didn't take no for an answer, especially not from someone they viewed as beneath them. In the days that followed, Thomas found himself becoming the topic of conversation among his other neighbors. Karen had apparently been making the rounds, painting him as some sort of electricity-hoarding monster who didn't care about the environment. Can you believe it? He overheard her telling another neighbor while he was retrieving his mail. He wants to charge me for charging my eco-friendly car. Some people just don't understand the importance of going green. Thomas bit his tongue and walked away. He wouldn't stoop to her level. Not yet, anyway. Sure enough, 3 days later, Thomas returned home from a morning shift to find the extension cord once again running from his outlet to Karen's Tesla. This time, there was no note, just the audacity of someone who clearly thought rules didn't apply to them. Thomas stood there, staring at the cord, something shifting inside him. He wasn't an angry man by nature. In fact, his coworkers often joked that he was almost unnaturally calm, even during major power outages or system failures. But there was something about this, about the sheer entitlement of it, that sparked something in him. He didn't unplug the cord this time. Instead, he went inside his garage, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. As an electrical engineer who had spent years tinkering with power systems, Thomas had accumulated quite a collection of equipment. Among his treasures was an old treadmill he picked up at a yard sale, intending to rewire it into a generator for one of his hobby projects. He dragged the treadmill out to his workbench, a plan forming. It would take some work, but he had all afternoon. By the time the sun began to set, Thomas had transformed the treadmill into a rudimentary power conditioner. When plugged in, it would allow electricity to flow, but only if someone was actively walking on the treadmill, generating kinetic energy. The faster they walked, the more power would flow. Stop walking, and the power would cut out almost immediately. Thomas tested his invention, walking briskly for a few minutes while monitoring the output with a voltmeter. It worked perfectly. The device wouldn't damage Karen's car. Thomas was too professional for that. But it would certainly make her work for her stolen electricity. With a satisfied grin, Thomas wheeled his creation outside, disconnected Karen's extension cord from the wall outlet, and plugged it into his modified treadmill instead. Then he plugged the treadmill into his outlet. To the casual observer, nothing would look different. Just a strange-looking machine sitting beside his house with a cord running to the Tesla. After making sure everything was working correctly, Thomas settled onto his porch with a cold beer and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Karen pulled up in her husband's SUV about an hour later, clearly coming to retrieve her fully charged Tesla. She parked behind it, got out, and headed straight for the extension cord, not even glancing toward Thomas's house. When she unplugged the cord from her car, her expression changed from satisfied to confused. She checked the Tesla's display, then looked back at the cord in her hand. Having some trouble, Thomas called from his porch, taking a sip of his beer. Karen spun around, startled. My car barely charged at all. What did you do? Thomas gestured to the treadmill. I made some improvements to my outlet. It's now powered by kinetic energy. You have to walk on the treadmill to generate electricity. Karen stared at him, then at the treadmill, then back at him. You can't be serious. Dead serious, Thomas replied. You're welcome to charge your car using my electricity, but you'll need to put in some work for it. Think of all the health benefits. You get exercise, your car gets power, and I don't have to foot the bill for your transportation. Win-win-win. Karen's face turned a shade of red that Thomas found almost scientifically interesting. This is ridiculous. You can't do this. Thomas took another sip of his beer. Actually, I can. It's my property, my electricity, and now my terms. Feel free to hop on and give it a try. I'd recommend starting slow. It takes about 3 miles of walking for a minimal charge. For a moment, Karen looked like she might actually explode. Then, clutching her extension cord like a lifeline, she marched back to the SUV, her heels clicking aggressively against the pavement. I'll be reporting this, she called over her shoulder. This is harassment. Thomas raised his beer in a mock toast. Happy walking. From his porch, Thomas watched as Karen struggled to maneuver her husband's SUV close enough to the Tesla to use jumper cables. After 3 failed attempts, she finally succeeded, but not before accidentally backing over one of her own meticulously arranged potted plants. The sight of Karen, dressed in her designer clothes, attempting to jump-start her luxury electric car while a perfectly good power source sat just feet away, requiring only a bit of exercise, was perhaps the most satisfying thing Thomas had witnessed in years. The next day, Thomas received a visit from Officer Reynolds, a local cop who'd gone to high school with him. Karen had indeed filed a complaint for theft of electricity. That irony was almost poetic. "So let me get this straight," Reynolds said, barely containing his amusement after Thomas explained the situation. "She was stealing your electricity, and when you made it harder for her to steal it, she reported you for theft." "That about sums it up," Thomas nodded. Reynolds shook his head. "Well, I have to file the report, but don't worry about it. Just maybe consider putting a lock on your outdoor outlet." "Where's the fun in that?" Thomas grinned. After Officer Reynolds left, Thomas received a text from his nephew Jason, a college student with a popular TikTok account. "Uncle T, everyone at school was talking about you and the treadmill charger. Someone posted the whole story online and it's going viral. You're a legend." Thomas, who barely understood social media, was baffled. Who had posted about it? How did people know? He soon found out when his phone began ringing nonstop. Apparently, one of his neighbors had captured Karen's meltdown on video and shared it with a local Facebook group. From there, it had spread to every corner of the internet, with headlines like "Local Hero Makes Karen Walk for Her Stolen Electricity" and "Power Plant Workers' Perfect Response to Entitled Neighbor." By that evening, news vans were parked on Maple Street, hoping to catch a glimpse of the infamous treadmill or, better yet, Karen herself. Thomas tried to keep a low profile, but when a reporter approached him for comment, he couldn't resist a simple statement. "I just believe that if you want something, you should be willing to work for it." The internet exploded again, with memes of Thomas's face and quotes about working for what you want, spreading across every platform. Overnight, he had become a reluctant folk hero for anyone who had ever dealt with an entitled neighbor. Word of Thomas's treadmill solution spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Within days, people were driving by just to see the setup, which Thomas had conspicuously left in place. Some neighbors even stopped to take pictures, giving him a thumbs up when they spotted him on his porch. Karen, meanwhile, had become suspiciously absent from neighborhood gatherings. Her normal routine of patrolling the street, looking for violations of rules that didn't exist, had all but disappeared. Just when Thomas thought the situation was settling down, things took another turn. He came home from work one day to find a certified letter from a law firm representing an anonymous neighborhood resident. The letter claimed that his unauthorized power generation device was an eyesore and potentially unsafe, demanding its removal within 48 hours or legal action would follow. Thomas laughed out loud. Karen was clearly escalating, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. Instead of removing the treadmill, Thomas decided to enhance it. The next day, he added a small digital display that showed exactly how many kilowatt hours had been generated and what that translated to in dollars. He also painted the entire contraption a bright fluorescent green, the same color as Karen's prized garden hose that she'd once lectured another neighbor about for being the wrong shade of neutral. The additions were perfectly timed. That evening, a small crowd had gathered near his house, hoping to see the famous treadmill. To everyone's surprise and delight, a black luxury SUV pulled up. Karen's husband, Richard, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and an expensive suit, approached Thomas with an extended hand and a grin that suggested he wasn't there on hostile terms. "You must be Thomas," he said, shaking hands firmly. "I've heard a lot about you, mostly in shrill, outraged tones from my wife." "Richard, I presume," Thomas replied, unable to hide his surprise. "The very same. Look, I just wanted to stop by and apologize for Karen's. Well, Karen-ness. She told me she had permission to use your outlet." Richard chuckled, shaking his head. "I should have known better, and for what it's worth, I think your solution is absolutely brilliant. I'm an engineer myself, and I appreciate good problem solving when I see it." Thomas's opinion of Richard immediately improved. "I appreciate that. No hard feelings on my end." Good. Richard nodded, then lowered his voice. "Between you and me, Karen's been insufferable since this whole thing started. Our home has become a war room of strategies to take you down. I'm half expecting to find a bulletin board with your picture surrounded by red string when I get home." They both laughed, and Thomas felt a genuine moment of camaraderie with the man unfortunate enough to be married to Hurricane Karen. "Well," Richard said, glancing at his watch, "I should get going before she sends out a search party. But I wanted you to know not everyone in our house thinks you're the villain." As Richard walked back to his car, Thomas called after him, "You're welcome to try the treadmill any time." Richard's booming laugh echoed down the street. "Don't tempt me. I could use the exercise." About a week after the treadmill incident, Thomas came home to find a plain white envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a check for $94.37 and a tersely worded note. "Estimated cost of electricity used. Will not be requiring your services in the future." Thomas chuckled, tucked the check into his wallet, and headed inside. That evening, as he sat on his porch enjoying the sunset, he noticed Karen's Tesla parked in her driveway, right next to a newly installed home charging station. Victory was sweet, but Thomas was surprised to find it a bit hollow. The excitement of the past few weeks had been oddly enjoyable, giving him something to look forward to beyond his usual routine of work, beer, and solitude. Without the Karen drama, Maple Street seemed almost too quiet. The viral fame had mostly died down too. There were still occasional drive-bys from people hoping to see the famous treadmill, but the news vans had long since departed for the next story. Thomas was just about to resign himself to returning to his peaceful but somewhat boring life when his phone rang. It was Linda from the Maple Street Community Association. "Thomas, I hope I'm not disturbing you," she chirped over the line. "The association was wondering if you might be interested in showcasing your unique invention at our upcoming Green Living event. We're focusing on creative ways to conserve energy and promote healthy living. Your treadmill charger would be perfect." Thomas laughed. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. It's educational, it's innovative, and let's face it, it's entertaining. Plus, I think it sends a wonderful message about working for what you want." Thomas considered it. "Who else will be there?" "Oh, lots of local businesses and residents. The mayor might even stop by." And Linda paused dramatically. "Karen has volunteered to showcase her new home charging system." Now that was interesting. "She knows you're inviting me too." "Well, not yet," Linda admitted, "but she can't exactly back out once she finds out. It would look petty, don't you think?" Thomas grinned. The chance to showcase his invention, right alongside Karen's boring, conventional charging station, was too good to pass up. "Count me in, Linda." The following weekend, Thomas decided to host a small neighborhood barbecue. He sent invitations to everyone on Maple Street, including Karen and Richard. He didn't expect Karen to show up, but it seemed like the neighborly thing to do. To his surprise, she did appear, briefly, arriving with a store-bought fruit platter and a stiff smile. She placed the platter on the food table, exchanged a few awkward pleasantries with the other neighbors, and then made her way over to Thomas, who was manning the grill. "I want you to know," she said, her voice low, "that I still think what you did was completely uncalled for." Thomas flipped a burger. "Plugging your car into my outlet without permission was uncalled for. I just got creative with the solution." Karen pressed her lips together. "Well, I paid you back." "You did?" Thomas nodded. "Thank you for that." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them before Karen finally spoke again. "My husband thought it was hilarious, by the way. He's been insufferable about it." Thomas couldn't help but grin. "Smart man." "Himph." Karen sniffed, but there was a hint, just a hint, of something less hostile in her expression. "Anyway, I've installed my own charging station now, so you can put away your ridiculous contraption." "Actually," Thomas said, "I've been thinking of reproposing it. Maybe set it up as a charging station for the neighborhood kids' phones and tablets. They have to walk a mile to earn an hour of screen time." For the briefest moment, something that might have been a genuine smile flickered across Karen's face. "Now that's an idea I could actually support." The Green Living event turned out to be a massive success. Thomas's treadmill charger was the star attraction, with people lining up to take selfies with it or try walking on it to charge their phones. Karen's sleek home charging station, while certainly more practical, couldn't compete with the novelty and humor of Thomas's invention. What surprised Thomas most was when Karen approached his booth during a lull in the crowd. "I have to admit," she said, arms crossed but tone less combative than usual, "you've turned your pettiness into something almost useful." "High praise coming from you," Thomas replied with a smirk. Karen almost smiled back. "The kids seem to like it." "They do," Thomas agreed, watching as a young girl walked vigorously on the treadmill, delighted by the numbers climbing on the display. "Gets them moving instead of just staring at screens all day." Karen nodded thoughtfully. "Richard mentioned you were thinking of donating the proceeds to the animal shelter." "That was the plan," Thomas confirmed, surprised she knew about it. "Well," Karen said, straightening her perfectly pressed blouse, "I'm on the shelter's fundraising committee. If you're serious about it, we could collaborate. Make it official." Thomas couldn't believe what he was hearing. Karen Dennison proposing they work together. The world truly was full of surprises. "I'd be open to that," he said carefully. "Good." Karen gave a curt nod. "I'll have my assistant email you the details." As she walked away, Thomas couldn't help but shake his head in wonder. From electricity thief to reluctant collaborator, Karen was nothing if not adaptable. In the months that followed, the treadmill charger became a fixture in the neighborhood. Thomas set it up permanently at the corner of his property, now with proper weatherproofing and safety features. Kids would stop by after school to charge their devices, and adults would occasionally use it too, especially after Richard started a personal challenge to see how many miles he could walk while on conference calls. The collaboration with the animal shelter was surprisingly successful. Karen's organizational skills combined with Thomas's innovation raised enough money to renovate the shelter's entire dog run. They even made the local news again, this time standing side by side, Karen stiffly professional and Thomas awkwardly amused by the whole situation. They weren't friends, not by a long shot. Karen still complained about his holiday decorations being excessive, and Thomas still deliberately mowed his lawn at 7:30 a.m. on Sundays, when he knew she liked to sleep in. But they had reached an understanding. A truce built on.